Okay, hi all. Just a quick heads up, just let me know if the audio's okay, and if it is, I can get rid of these headphones. Hi Rob, hi Anthony. Hi John. Thanks Justin. Okay. Right, so there's a good few things to cover tonight. So let me start. That's per inch. Now, just bear with me 1 second. Yeah, dots per inch is probably going to be the first thing. We'll just have to check something here. Just make sure we're still live. Bam, bam, bam. Just restart that. There we are. That's great. Thanks, Chris. So basically, dots per inch or DPI. Some people can get very, very confused about this, and it can lead to prints that aren't as sharp as they should be. So basically, I'm just going to get into it here. Let me see. Yeah, I'm just going to open this image. It's a raw file, so I'm just going to bring it in from Bridge into Photoshop. It doesn't matter what image it is. It's just to show the principles behind it. So I'm just going to open it as it is. I'm not worried about tweaking it or anything like that. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. And now, actually, it's not that file. It is this one. It's a bit. I had opened it earlier on there, and I just created a PSD of it, and I put a few guidelines in for a specific reason. That file at the minute is, if I just get myself out of the way here. Now, yeah. If you can't see the rulers up the top there, if you can't see kind of numbers either side, if you go to the view and show, just underneath that there's an option called rulers. So you go view rulers or controller command R, and if you turn them off, obviously they go off, and controller command R brings them back. Okay, so if I was to say right click on one of the rulers, I can choose, at the minute it's in pixels, I can choose to have it in inches, millimeters, whatever I'm more happier with. In this case I want to just choose inches, so I'm going to just choose inches. And if we look in the bottom corner of the picture, now if your picture happens to look like this, if your Photoshop opens the file and it looks like that, it's tabbed, you'll still have access to it. You just have to highlight the bit of text in the bottom corner and left click on it, and it will pop up with the size, the file size. So it's basically about 24 inches by 17.5 inches. That's how, and it's 300 dots per inch. So if I was to print that on a printer or get it printed, it would be roughly, obviously it would be exactly 24 and a half inches by 17.5 inches is the size of it. Okay, so I drew these guidelines. Guidelines are incredibly powerful little things. To get a guideline, all you do is from one of the rulers, you just left click and drag down, and there's a guide. If you want to get rid of it, you move your mouse over it, click on the move tool, which is in the top corner, it's V on the keyboard, and then when you highlight the guide, it'll turn into this two-sided little kind of a grabber. You can left click and just drag it up off the page, and the same, you can bring one in from the side, and you can bring one back out again. You can drag it out if you want. Okay, so basically that in the middle there, I created that as a size, and I know it's exactly 12 inches by 8 inches. And I did that by basically getting the marquee tool, and across the top where it says style, choose fixed size, and then I basically typed in 12IN for 12 inches, and tabbed across to the height and typed in 8IN, and then when you click on the screen you'll get this marquee. That's exactly 12 inches by 8 inches. Okay, and basically I moved that around the screen, and I kind of seen the crop that I wanted, and I just brought the guidelines in. Okay, I only did that for one specific reason. So if we get the crop tool, and in the width and the height, make sure it has width, height, resolution on it. If we go to 12 IN for inches, 8 IN, and 300, and the drop down box pixels per inch. Okay, that's very important, pixels per inch. Okay, so what will happen now is when I draw a crop, and you'll see it on the, I'm leaving my left mouse drawn down there, and you'll see it on the screen. It says 12.003 inches by 8.003 inches. In other words, it's a 12 by 8 inch print. Okay, a crop that's going to happen, and it's also going to happen 300. Make sure it says 300 pixels per inch, right? If that said centimeters, right, and you typed in 300 and then changed it to inches, it changes to 762 pixels per inch, and you don't need that. So just make sure it says 300 pixels per inch. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to crop here now, right? But before I'm going to crop, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to show you how you can create a few keyboard shortcuts, which are incredibly handy to have when you're working on photographs. And hi, John. And basically, I always use them. Okay, so the first one would be basically duplicating the image. I have a keyboard shortcut for that. So if you go to the image menu, you'll see that I have, beside duplicate, my keyboard shortcut is Alt, Shift, Control and D. Now by default, I can't remember if that's actually in Photoshop by default. I've had it for that way for so long. So basically I'm going to show you how to do it if it's not in there, and I'm going to show you a few other ones as well. But having said that, if I press Control, Shift, Alt on a PC, or Shift, Command and Option on a Mac, and then I press D for duplicate, or sorry, not D, yeah, D, it comes up with duplicate image and what do you want to call it. So we'll just call it crop, and now we have two images. Okay, and that's handy for duplicating stuff. And there's another one then that I use, and I'll show you now. So we've duplicated it again. I'll show you how to set up the shortcuts now in a second. It's Control, Alt, Shift and V for tile vertical. So then if I want to zoom in, say I'm zooming into this one here, and we just zoom in, and I want to match the two of them together. Say I moved it across this way, and I want to match the two of them, and I want to see exactly the same zoom and position on both of the images. I have another shortcut set up which is Match All, which is Control Alt Shift or Command Option Shift M for Match All. Okay, so if you have the Move tool selected, it will move the image around the screen. So with the Move tool selected, what you can do is you can hit the space bar and it gives you the hand tool. Alright, but it will only move, when you left click and drag, it only moves the first one. It doesn't move the two of them around. Okay, so Control Alt Shift M or Command Option Shift M to match them again. So with the space key down, if I want to move both of them at the same time, you hold the Shift key, and then when I move one, I move the two of them. Okay, because I have my Shift key down as well. So I can left click and I can pan across the two images. All right. And it's kind of handy for comparing images together, you know. And the other one then I use is, another shortcut would be, if you hit Z on the keyboard for zoom, at the minute that's going to zoom in because it has the plus selected in the top corner there. All right. If I want to zoom out, if I hold the Alt key down, or the Option key on a Mac, that gives me the opposite. So when I click on it, it will zoom out now. Okay, because plus was selected. So if minus was selected up in the zoom options in the top, across the top there, if I hold Alt, it will zoom in. Depends on what zoom is selected. You can see it there. Holding down Alt will change it. Letting go Alt brings it back. So depending on which option is selected, if you hold Alt, it gives you the alternative or option on a Mac, and basically lets you do the other. So if I want the two of them to zoom out now, if I hold down the Shift key as well and I click, it zooms the two of them out. Or if I let go of the Shift key, or sorry, let go of the Alt key, it goes back to zooming in, and I can hold down the Shift key, and when I click on them now, it's going to zoom them in identically. And if I hold space down, I have my hand back, and I can move around the screen. So you can have 10 or 11 images right beside each other, tiled like this, and it's very, very handy, okay? So, where are we going with 13? I'd say everybody's out enjoying barbecues. So how do you do this with the shortcut keys, okay? So basically, if you go to the Edit menu, or on, give me 1 second. Yeah. If you go to the Edit menu and down to Keyboard Shortcuts, okay, that's on a PC. I'm not too sure where it is on a Mac. It's probably in the same menu actually. It could be in the Photoshop menu at the start, but it gives you the option then to go into the Edit menu here, and if you find Duplicate, oh, it's not in the Edit menu. Silly me. Yeah, it's under the Image menu. Okay, so Image Duplicate's what we're looking for. Okay, so Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, then go to the Image menu, and you'll see that, where are you? There we go. Duplicate's there, and if there's nothing there, it's like this. All you do is click in there, and then you hold down Control Shift Alt or Command Option Alt on a PC, on a Mac, and hit D, and it puts it in for you. All right. So the next one we need then is Window, Arrange. Now by default, yours won't have any shortcut key beside Tile All vertically, or Match All is another one. Okay. You won't have any shortcuts for them because they by default don't have shortcuts. Okay. So what you would do is go in, Keyboard Shortcuts, go to Image first, scroll down, find Duplicate, click in there, press Alt Shift Control D, or Command Shift and Option D on a Mac, and and click Accept. Okay, it could tell you that there's a conflict between, you know, some weird option, but what it gets rid of by pressing Command Shift Control and Alt Shift and Control and D, what it gets rid of is minimalistic compared to what you can do with this. You don't need to worry about what it gets rid of. Okay, so then you go into, you go back up and close down the Image menu and go to Window, and then into Arrange and Tile All vertically. And when you're in there, it'll look like this, and when you click on it, you have an option to click. So you'll see a blank area like this. So just click in the blank area, press Control Shift Alt and V for vertical, click Accept, and then scroll down, and you'll see Match All. Match All matches the zoom and the position of all the windows. and match all, click in there and Control Alt Shift M, or Shift Command Option M, alright, and accept. And when you do that, that gives you extra kind of, it gives you a lot more speed. If you're constantly using a shortcut, a menu item, say trim or apply image, or you're always using image size. Image size has a shortcut key. Some of them don't. So if you're constantly using an image, I'd advise a menu item. I would advise you to go into the menus, go into the shortcut keys by going Edit Keyboard Shortcuts, which is Alt Shift Control and K, or Command Shift Alt K, and go in there and set them up. And then what you can do is this: when you have it set up the way you like it, and I have my windows set up the way I like it, sort of thing, my tabs and all over here, whatever, you can go Window and you can go Workspace, and you can save a workspace. You can say New Workspace. So we'll just call this Test, and you can save keyboard shortcuts, the menus, and the toolbar. Okay, so they will save all the options you have kind of tweaked, so that you don't have to worry about them. Okay, so I can click save there, and that's fine. So basically now, if I went and I closed down that one, and we went, where are we now? We just made that a bit smaller there, sorry. If I want to go Window Workspace, if I went to a different workspace, say I went to Graphics Workspace, right? That's a different workspace if you're doing graphics for web and stuff like that, okay? So I can then go back to my particular workspace that I normally would do is this one. You know, I use this one. But you can have loads more, and the test would be the same there because I tweaked it around, okay? So if I then move, say I have the histogram palette and I just move it over there for some weird reason, okay, and I go and change the workspace, because I'm on test now at the minute, so I went and changed the workspace to painting, and then went back and changed the workspace back to my test. It would remember the last thing I did, but I don't want that. I want to reset my test. So to do that, you just go Window, Workspace, and Reset, and then it'll say Test after it because we're on the test workspace, and it brings it back to where it should be. Okay, so in my case, my one would be the workspace I would normally have would be this one, Workspace Reset Larry. That's my workspace normally. Is I'd work with the channels on the bottom and the layers on the top. I switched them around so that you could see different menu items, because we were doing channels there a couple of days ago, and I just never bothered switching it back. But it means then you can have that option. Okay, so basically now that we have that done, I just want to go in and I want to show you what the dots per inch thing does with an image. Okay, dots per inch would start off like this. Hi Rob, we'll be going through that focus recompose thing as well tonight. So if you keep an ear out there, if you can hold on. So this is it's a handy little graphic actually. This. So basically, what this represents is this, right? I'm just going to zoom it up a bit. If you can imagine, I'm just getting me a pen. So over here, dots per inch is basically what it says. It equates to pixels per inch. So if we had a document and it was 1 inches by 1 inches square, so it was going to print to 1 inch by 1 inch, all right, and it only had 10 pixels per inch, it would just have 10 pixels across and 10 pixels down, okay? And if you had got that document then and resized it to be 2 inches across by 2 inches down, it would only have 5 pixels per inch, because the original 10 pixels would have to go across. So that first inch would only have 5 in it, and the second one would only have 5 in it. So by doubling the size of the document without adding more pixels, it means the dots per inch goes down, okay? Is there any questions on that? Right. Sometimes it'll become more kind of, there'll be more of an explanation now in a few minutes, but just any questions on that particular part of it, okay? And so basically what you're looking at there then is that's a 2-inch wide. I have to, now that's 2 inches wide by 1 inches high, and it's 10 dots per inch. So basically the image is made up of 20 pixels wide by 10 pixels high. All right, now it's going to print absolutely really rubbish, but it was only just a representation of what dots per inch means. All right, so if we go back to the other image we had open, and where are we? Window, cropped. There we go. So I'm going to duplicate this image first. So what I did there before, instead of going image and down to duplicate, I have a shortcut key now, which is Control Alt Shift D or Command Option Shift D. Okay, so I want to duplicate it first because I want to keep the original image. So I'm going to duplicate it and call it 12 by 8. I'm going to duplicate it again, Control Alt Shift D, and call this one 12 by 8 150 DPI. I'm going to duplicate it again and call this one 12 by 8 72 DPI, and it'll make sense now in a minute. And I'm going to duplicate it again, and this one's going to be called 10 DPI. Okay, so if we go back to the first one, that's our original PSD, right? I can get rid of that now because I don't need it. So this first one here, the 12 by 8, the crop tool, I'm going to go into the crop tool, and it's 12 inches by 8 inches, and I want 300 DPI, okay, dots per inch, and I'm going to drag it inside the guide bars that I have, and I'm going to hit return, and that's going to be now exactly 12 inches by 8 inches at 300 DPI. Okay, so that will print now on a printer, and it'll be nice and high resolution. Okay, so the next one, the 150 DPI one, all we're going to do is going to change it from 300 to 150, and I'm just going to bring it down and bring it down. Hit, so that's now 150 dots per inch. You can see it there now. It's 12 by 8 inches, but it's 150 dots per inch. Okay, going to go to the next one. This is the 72 dots per inch one. Crop it again. That's our 72 dots per inch. You can see it there, 12 by 8 inches still, but there's only 72 dots per inch in it. And then the final one, then we're going to change it and call it 10 dots per inch. Okay, so if I was to do my thing again by going Window, Arrange, Tile All vertically, which is technically Alt Shift Control V, and then Window, Arrange, Match All, which is the zoom. Okay, those 4 images there, the first one on the left, that's at 300 dots per inch. The next one over is 150 dots per inch. The next one is 72 dots per inch, and the last one is 10. Okay, this is where it gets to be a bit of fun. If I click on the first one, and if I hold shift down with the zoom tool, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now that's 100% zoom. Okay. Okay, that's zoomed to 100%. And they don't, you know, the 150 dots per inch in the other and the 72 doesn't look too bad because it's only 100%. You're not seeing it. Okay, but if we were to right click with the zoom tool selected, right click on the first image and say print size, right click on the second one and say print size, right click on the third one and say print size, and right click on the fourth one and say print size, you can kind of see that the fourth one at 10 pixels per inch is kind of messed up. You know, it's pretty well messed up. So basically, I'm just going to zoom back out here. And match all. So that's the 72 and that's the 10. Ah yeah, that's the original. I just undid that there for 1 second, so bear with me now for 1 sec because I cropped it by accident. I shouldn't have. I wasn't watching what I was doing. I was undoing something. There we go. So there we go. And tile all vertically. So any questions on that? If we were to zoom the 10 dots per, even zoom in the 72 dots per inch one in, you know, it doesn't look too bad. But the problem is, you've lost the resolution that you have on the 300 dots per inch one. Okay, so if you're printing anything, always do it to 300 dots per inch. But I was just showing you what happens at 10 dots per inch. And if you actually look at, if I was to move that up to the top there, and you see where it says 5 to 6, that's inches, and if you count across, you've 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pixels. So your image is literally 10 pixels per inch. Alright, so that's basically the dots per inch versus your print size. Yeah, the dots per inch needs to be thought of in combination with the inches. It doesn't mean anything unless you actually combine it with a measurement of inches, and that's what it lives with, is dots per inches. Okay. Any questions on that before I move on to the next thing? Grand. Okay. So, focusing and recomposing. Okay. One of the people that are looking there today, he had asked me in an email that he just mentioned it to me that he'd seen a bunch of photographers sometimes and they'd actually focus on something and then recompose the image. And I'm just going to open this up here for a second and show you. And if we it's a bit of a hinky little drawing. I found it online somewhere, so kudos to the original poster. But if you're dealing with spot, if your focus point is the middle focus point on your camera, okay, center focus point, if you go around the whole time and center focus on stuff, what's happening there is you're basically turning sideways and you're focusing up. You're gonna basically put the focus point over the person's eye, and then because there's going to be half the image on top is going to be the person's head is going to be right in the middle of the image. Then you'll recompose down, but that can get very hairy, because if you look at the red line there, I'm just gonna do this, yeah, brush. If you look at this red line, A, just there, right? That's your original focus because you tilt it up the way to make the eye the center point in the actual camera. Then you half press your shutter release and then recompose the image down. But the problem is, I'll just change the color of this. there's an arc that happens when you tilt down. What's happening is the closer you are to the image that you're taking, the more pronounced it is. Okay, so in that case there, that would be probably 2 or 3 feet away, maybe 4 feet away. Okay, and if you can imagine, if you stuck your arm out like this, oh, it's very, very hard for me to do this now. I'd normally show people when I'm doing a workshop, and pointed your arm straight out and then tilted your arm down. If you point your arm straight out and go over to your kitchen wall or whatever, with your arm pointed directly straight out like that, and it's tipping the kitchen wall, okay? So your arm is coming out and it's tipping the wall. And then you move your arm down, you'll see that as you move it down, it starts off tipping the wall, but because of the way it works, by the time it gets down to where it needs to be, because you recompose the image, there's a gap between the wall and your hand. Okay? And that happens here. In other words, the person, you're recomposing up the way. So I'm going to recompose up, and I'm going to use my camera, that finger there, right? And if I do that then and recompose down to there, I've lost a couple of inches off my finger because I'm back focusing. That's what's happening with that image. I'll just show you here. The image is back focusing because you've gone from here to there. There's this much of a distance now that it's back focusing, and your eyes aren't sharp anymore. What is sharp is their ear. The person's ear or the object's ear would be sharp, or wherever it happens to be. It becomes more apparent at closer zoom, if you're closer to the actual object. If you're using a couple of 100mm of a lens and you're 20-30 feet away, or you're at a f16 or f11, it becomes less of a problem than if you're shooting really close and you're shooting wide open at 1.4 or 2.8. Then it's a real problem, because your depth of field is related to 3 things. Your depth of field, it's related to the aperture, the zoom, the focal length, and how far you are away from the object you're taking. Okay, and this then becomes exaggerated, the difference between here and here. Okay, so basically what that boils down to is this. So I found this, and basically if you were to take a shot and focus on the number 20 on the dartboard and center focus on that now, and then recompose the shot to get the shot that's over here, when you zoomed in on it at 100%, you'd find that the original shot you took where the 20 was bang smack in the middle on the focus point is now blurred, because you're basically back focusing. Your focus has gone from being perfectly like that to being focusing on a back instead of here. Okay, so what you basically need to make sure that if you're going to do that center point focus thing, make sure that number one, you're at a narrower aperture like f8, f11, f16. Number two, you're not extremely close to the subject, and then it becomes less of an issue, because the further back you get, if you got a massive, say you got a 4.8 meter lump of 2x1 or something, right? And you got a friend to hold it against the wall, and you held the other side of it at eye level, and then you held this side here and let your friend drop it down a couple of it, like to the bottom of the wall, you would probably see at the distance of 4.8 meters away that it only kind of moves out maybe half an inch or an inch. Whereas if you got the likes of, say, a meter long ruler and got your friend to hold it against the wall and you held the other side of it, and then you dropped it down a couple of foot, you would see the ruler vastly swing in this way. So it's to do with how close you are to it as well, okay? So, any questions on that before we move on? Oops. I'd say everybody's out having a Barbie. We don't seem to have as many watching tonight. So it's not too bad a night out. So, okay. Right. So that's your focus recompose, okay? So basically people are doing that thing where they're literally in the, or they can also be doing this. They can actually be taking an exposure reading from a certain point in the picture. So you can have exposure lock in your camera. So they could be actually looking over to one point, making sure that whatever they're exposure locking on there is the exposure they want, then bringing it back and then clicking. So it could be two things they're doing. They could be focusing on one thing first, then moving it back, or they could be taking an exposure lock reading off of one thing and then moving it back and recomposing, okay? So that's why you'd see sometimes people would be, yeah, no problems. That's why sometimes you'll see people do that thing. I do it all the time when I'm using center, but I now have a mirrorless where I can just move it up to where I want to have it, and with the mirrorless cameras, or try and get it. Normally, even the basic cameras now have at least 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. They have 9 center points. See, there used to be the yeah. See, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. What they were probably doing there was they were exposing off of one, and then bang, and it was exposure. Yeah, because basically, you know, I would just use my hand as an exposure, but obviously that's just me. But there's a couple of different reasons why to do it. That's probably the main one. But if you can move the focus point or select the focus point that's near where you want it when the composition is right. So if I was to look at my composition there on the screen now, I would want to select the focus point that is as close as possible to my eye on that side or on that side. Okay, so I wouldn't want to select the center point there. I'd want to select one of the ones that are up here or over here. Or if you have a mirrorless camera, just move the focus point from there to there, or from there to there. Okay, and it gets, obviously the closer you get, then it's more of an exaggerated thing. Okay. So cropping in camera versus cropping afterwards. Crop, and one of the other, I don't think he's here tonight, but one of the other people that asked me about, there's advantages and disadvantages to actually taking an image and cropping it in camera, and then another one being actually cropped as afterwards, right? So there's two schools of thought. You either take your image and crop it as tight as you can in the camera, or you take an image and you have a bit of space all around it, okay? And by having a little bit of space all around it, it enables you to have a bit of crop room, basically. So say you're taking a bunch of shots of a communion or something. Whenever they get back to normal, the kids are having a communion or something, and there's a mommy and a daddy and the kids or whatever, and parents and aunties and uncles and all, and you want to get them into the shot. There's a danger if you crop it in the camera to exactly frame it up, that if they want a certain size of picture, you won't have enough room to crop it on the outside, because an 8x12 is a different crop to an A4, and an A4 is a different crop to a 7x5, and a 7x5 is a different crop to an 18x12. Okay, I'll just go back and get that one, and I'll just show you that, because this would have been on one of the earlier ones when I was testing out stuff. Okay, so basically this is just an image. I downloaded it somewhere on the line, but I just made up these crops on it. Okay, so that's the original image. Say that was taken in camera. Okay, if you wanted to make an A4 print out of that, an A4 crop, right, what would happen is you would lose that much on either side of the original image that was taken. So if you took the shot so tight that it was right in, if it was right in against, say, give me 1 second. If you crop that and it was right in against her hand here, and then right up against the guys in the camera, and then you wanted to make an A4 print out of it, because that takes a chunk out of either side of it, you'd end up losing to here and losing to here. You know, sorry, I'm not very good at drawing straight lines with a pen. You'd lose this much here and this much, so, depending on how you cropped it in the camera, okay? So select all, backspace, delete. Now, so that's your A4. So say you wanted to do an 8x6, all right? That's your crop on an 8x6 compared to what it was taken in camera. So if whoever you're taking the pictures for wants an 8x6 and you have cropped it in camera to the correct size that it looked okay in the camera, and they want an 8x6, then you're in real trouble because you're cropping off more on the side as well. So there's that school of thought. Leave a little bit of extra all around in case you have to crop it in, because someone might want a square crop and you can't do a square crop if you're, you know, of a group of people. If you don't have, say they're outside in there's grass and trees and whatever, and if you don't have the trees above them and the grass below them, you can't do a square crop, because maybe there's 10 people wide and you cropped it nice for a rectangle, but you didn't leave enough on the side in case you wanted to crop it as a square. You know, there's things like that you have to think of. You can't exactly take the picture again sometimes if it's a wedding, like, you know. And an 8x12 then, or sorry, a 12x10 crop, sorry, that's how much you're losing on a 12x10. So always be wary of what the output's going to be. If you're only posting stuff up to Facebook, crop it to whatever looks the best, and then Facebook will just kind of put a black line on either side of it, on the outside of where you have anyway. You know what I mean? It's not the end of the world, like. And then if you wanted a 12x18, it's only a tiny bit of a crop, depending on your sensor, obviously. If you've got a full frame camera, it's a 3x2 sensor. In other words, for every 3 pixels across, there's 2 down. If you have a Micro Four Thirds, it's a 4x3 sensor. And if you've got a mirrorless camera, they have the ability to shoot in 3x2, 4x3, 16x9, and 1x1 square. There's a load of abilities, right? Instead of cropping that afterwards, you can actually set it to 1x1 square and you walk around and all the pictures you're taking will be square. The disadvantage of that is you're losing stuff on either side of it. So if you made it your standard 4x3 or 3x4, depending on what kind of camera you have, and just gave it enough space either side, and just in your own head said, oh, I might like a square out of this, you can get the square out of the middle bit, but you don't necessarily have to, you won't end up being in trouble in the end of it all. The other side of that is this. So I'm going to slow that down, and where are we? Go back to this one. So that was cropped in camera. So I framed that to be exactly like that, right? Because I liked the way it looked. And I knew kind of, I had set the light up in the background, and I just moved over a slight little bit more to the right hand side to get it exactly where I wanted. And I put her off the side instead of putting her right bang smack in the middle. So if there's right bang smack in the middle in this, well, it's actually not in the middle in that one either. But I framed that in the camera, okay? Now I tried to frame that in the camera, but it wasn't exactly right, so you can crop it afterwards. But if you want to make a square out of that, it's easy enough to make a square out of it, because you've got enough space here that it'll make a square in the middle of it, you know what I mean? Now you will lose megapixels. So that was a 24 meg camera. The 24 meg cameras are enough. A 24 meg camera, right, at 6,000 by 4,000 pixels. The files, the pixel dimensions are enough for a 20 inch by roughly 13, just over 13 inches print. So a 20 by 13 inch print at 300 dots per inch without any loss of quality. And I like no loss. So if you have like that was a 24 meg camera. So if you have a 42 meg like the the AR7 Mark III or whatever, the Sony one, it has 42 meg. It's 9,500 pixels by 6,336, right? It's big enough to do a 31.5 inch by 21 inch print at 300 dots per inch without any loss of quality, you know. So if you're cropping something, if you like to crop after the fact and you have a lot of cash burning a hole in your back pocket, buy a high megapixel count camera, and that allows you to crop in afterwards and still have the same printable size that you would had if you had framed it by zooming in on another camera that was a 24 meg. You know what I mean? No bothers, David. Basically, Dave, we just covered dots per inch for printing online and the difference between 300 dots per inch, 150, 72, and 10. Okay, and what the dots per inch is actually in reference to as regards printing. All right, that was, and basically next after that was focus and recomposing, and how that back focuses and how you can be out of focus sometimes. Okay, so if you have any questions on that, give us a shout and I'll go through it again here, or if at the end of the thing you can just watch it later on, you know. Oh, that's grand. Thanks, John. So cool. So basically from here, right, I crop that in the camera. So that's one way of looking at it. And another way would be you could just take an ordinary image like this one. I would have to crop. I only have a 24-105 for the camera I have now, right? So basically that was taken at 105 mil. So I had no choice. I couldn't go in and crop it like in the camera. Okay, so I have a 24 meg camera. It's a Panasonic S1, right? It's a full frame, but it's a mirrorless. So basically I'm going to open that up, right? And if I was to crop that to make it a better picture, say, or a less more complicated picture, say I only wanted this much in it, okay, now my 24 meg camera is probably only going to have 12 meg, okay, but at least it gives me the option, because I took the picture at a wider angle, then I can crop that picture out of it. I can also then, if I wanted to, crop that as a picture. I could have that. Now none of these are not like, don't laugh, but they're rubbish pictures. I just took them to explain stuff. I could have that as a photograph there, or I could crop it and get rid of the building at the side there, you know what I mean, and get a nice kind of a crop that way. So I can crop after the fact. Now if I had a 70-200 mil zoom camera, I could have took a picture like that and it would have been exactly like that, but I would have had 24 megapixels. At the minute I don't. If I only have 7.4 meg, you'll see it at the bottom there. I only have 7, that has less than 8 megapixels in it, okay? And if you were to look at it this way, that's going to open up at 3,193 pixels, okay? So if I was to get a calculator here, this is how you can figure out how big it is. So 3,193. If I divide that by 300, because I'm printing 300 dots per inch, that'll go to a 10.5 inch print in width by whatever the height is. So I'd probably get a 10 by 8 out of that without too much. If we go the other way, which is 2327 divided by 300, 7.5. Yeah, 10.5 by 7.5. So I could get a crop. I could crop that, bring it into Photoshop, crop it, and get a 10 by 8 out of it, and actually not have to lose quality. Now it's very, very immaterial what quality you lose anyway when you're dealing with like high megapixel cameras. But like with your Sony camera, the 42 meg, I could crop this out of it, and actually instead of ending up with a 2 meg file, a 2 megapixel file, I would crop that out and I probably would have at least a 5 meg, you know, which is still good enough for a 6x4 or an 8x, you know, a small 8x6 maybe, or a 7x5. So it's down to cropping in camera is good for composition, but if you need the space afterwards, you're SOL. There's nothing you can do. Go back out and take the picture again at a wider angle. If you crop it after the fact, it at least gives you the option to crop in digitally, because you have the either side of what you want. So either side of the boat there, I have the tower and I have this boat and I have that red tower as well, the lighthouse tower. I have all of that there. If I initially took the picture to be that picture and I was trying to sell it to the papers or something, and the paper said to me, God, I wish I had got the red tower in there with the other tower in the background, I'd be out of luck. Unless I had this picture and then I could just crop it all and give him that picture instead. You know what I mean? So, any questions on that before we move on? So that's just cropping in camera versus cropping afterwards. They both have their kind of pluses and minuses. We'll just be wary of what each one of them does, okay? So custom keyboards, recompose, compose, cropping in camera. So we're all good on that, yeah? Oh, that's grand. Right, let me see. Geez, we got through that fairly quick. That's not too bad, actually. So cropping an image, cropping camera, post cropping, custom keyboards, window range. Right, I'm going to show you. It's another kind of a handy thing to have. So if I was to open up, actually, yeah, I'm going to just show you one more crop there for a minute. Yeah. There's handy little things that you might not know that are there inside of Camera Raw. So this is the latest version of Camera Raw. It's version 12.2. It's in most of them, but if you get the crop tool and you draw a crop, by default it might not have. If you left click and hold on the crop tool and just uncheck show overlay. The overlay is there, it's very handy. I love that overlay because it gives me an idea where the third lines are. The 1/3 line is the rule of thirds for composition and stuff like that. So by left clicking on the crop tool, it brings up a bunch of menus. And you can choose show overlay. And you can crop it then and get it so that the crop kind of has equal proportion to the lips there. Either side of the lips is bang on a third line, and you know what I mean. And then it's more pleasing to look at it that way than if I was to not have that option to show an overlay and I just kind of, I cropped it and I wasn't really looking at what I was doing, and I just decided that was okay as a crop. There's no, and now I visually can see now that there's way more room on this side than there is over the far side. So it's a kind of a handy little tip to have, that you can switch it on in the crop tool. So crop and show overlay. It just puts that rule of thirds lines in there, which is very, very handy. There's also that custom, yeah. It used to be lovely years ago when you went into the options thing in here, and you could do a custom crop, but you could actually tell it you wanted a crop size of, say, A4, 210 by 297, and you could crop all your images in here and it would be exactly that size for print size. But the problem with this crop ratio is it doesn't mean that it's going to print to, if I put a crop ratio of 8 by 10 in, it's not going to print to 8 by 10. It's just going to be a ratio of 10 across by 8 down. So you have to be really careful when you're cropping like that it's not a ratio, it's actually the print size that you're looking for, unless you have a specific reason to look for it in the crop tools, okay? So, we're up to 14. Who else joined? Yeah. So, and to clear that crop then, you could always left click the crop tool, hold it, and then say clear, crop. And that's it, you're back to normal, okay? The Camera Raw is great because it's non-destructive. There's these things called sidecar files that are saved with the file inside your folder. So if that image was called, what's it called? It's a bunch of, it's 059 raw or something like that, RW2. There'll be a file in there that you can't see by default that'll be called 059, and there'll be an XML after. It's an XML file. It's a sidecar file that is exactly the same name as that. And what happens is when you open up the file in Camera Raw, the image, it reads that XML file, knows exactly what to do with it, exposure, shadows, clarity, all this kind of crack, and it instantly does it as it's opening it up, so it remembers your last thing you did. So if I was to click crop on that and do an insane crop like that, and then click done, if I go back to bridge to look at it, it's cropped to that now. Okay? And you can see that there's a little crop icon in the top corner that denotes that it's been cropped. So you could open it again. And when you open something like that, and you go back to the crop tool, it remembers the crop. The crop is there. So from here, you could left click on the crop tool and say clear crop, and it clears it. Okay? Now there's another way of doing it. Say your crop was there and we said done. And we go back to there. Okay? So now we've cropped it. So say we wanted to get rid of all the things we've done to that file. We can just right click on it. I'm just going to go up here so we can see it. I'm just going to bring it up a small. Right click. And there's an option. I'm just going to bring this in here for a second so you can see it. So right click on your raw file. Go down to develop settings. And clear settings. And when you click that, it undoes everything that has been done to that raw file since it was first worked on. Okay, so don't do it unless you need to reset it back to the way it was when it came off the camera. Okay, so if you can understand that the raw files never get changed, it's only inside Camera Raw that sidecar file changes the stuff that goes on, and then when you open it up in Photoshop, it just brings in a PSD into Photoshop, but the raw file never ever gets changed. It can't be physically changed, okay? Because the Camera Raw remembers everything and it can undo everything. That's the beauty of Camera Raw. So, any questions on that before we move on? Okay, so say we were working on this as a picture, right? And we open it up. So we'll just find it in here. I'm just going to show you another little handy thing. I don't have a shortcut for this, but it's simple enough. Actually do it. So we're just going to be happy enough with the exposure the way it is. We're just going to open it up. Right, now I find it's very, very handy. I'm just going to check this. Yeah, we're still live. Beforehand we had what was called basically a duplicate image. You could duplicate it. Okay, so we've done that a load of times, but the problem is each one of them duplications is a different image. It's not the same image, it's a different one. So if you work on the first one, the second one is unchanged, okay, which is handy for some things. But say I wanted to be able to zoom in and say work on a few blemishes on the hair and stuff like that, but still see a kind of a zoomed out version of the same image to see if I'm going wrong or I'm going too much, or I'm actually, you know, going way overboard when I zoom back out, and then I say, oh my god, I have to change everything again. So there's a handy little thing that you can do. Okay, is the audio okay, everybody? Is it getting a bit nippy, or is it all right, the audio? And just as a matter of interest there, anyone that's still listening. Cause it's buffering a tiny bit on the live preview. Oh, that's grand, John. Thanks, man. So what you do is this, right? With your image selected, if you go to the window menu and you go to arrange, at the very, very bottom you have new window for whatever the file name is. If you click that, this basically gives you the exact same file that's open, okay? But I can keep one of them, say, exactly like that, and then I could go over to this other one here and I could zoom in on it. Okay, now if I was to edit the file, So say I added in the layers palette. So if you can't see the layers palette, go Window, Layers, or F7 on a keyboard. I added a new blank layer by clicking on the new blank layer icon. And if I just got a brush tool by hitting B on the keyboard and clicking on the swatch here and just show some mad color like neon pink, right? And if I use the right bracket key on the keyboard, I can make the brush size bigger, and the left bracket key makes it smaller. So I can actually brush here, and when I let go, it's on the other image. So if I'm zooming in here really close to get rid of this, and I happen to paint it out or whatever, I can see it on the other image. And if I turn off that layer, I can see it on the other image. But I have two, thanks Rob, I have two completely separate views of the image, one that's full on and one that's zoomed in, because sometimes when you're working away on stuff like this and you're cloning on things like this, you can't see that maybe it's messing up on the original image and it doesn't look exactly right. But by having two views like this, it's very handy. So I'm going to show you how to do that again, okay? So I'm just close all of them down, close all. Nope. No. So open up your image, just drag it into Photoshop, or right click, open in Camera Raw. Bunch of different ways of doing it. Click open image. So we have our image and we want a second window to view it. Basically it's a second window we need. So go Window, Arrange, New Window. Okay, so here's what's handy then. Remember that shortcut key I made before? Control Alt Shift V. Okay, that puts them nice and tiled together if you want that, and then you can just drag that middle one across, because maybe you want to just keep that one that size. And then on this side here we can zoom in and be working on this and see that. Okay, so if we were to get rid of a couple of blemishes, the quickest way, without going into too much detail, is new blank layer, and that gives us a completely transparent layer. That checkerboard thing there means that it's completely transparent. So if I was to turn off the background layer by clicking the eye visibility, you wouldn't be able to see anything. And click it back on. Okay, so usually for the likes of that kind of blemishes there, most of the time I'd use the healing brush. So over in the tools palette over here, you'll find, where is it gone? Because it keeps changing. I love the way every single time, there we go. So that was the red eye tool. So spot healing and healing brush, they're two completely different things. Okay, the spot healing guesses what to do, and you know you're on the spot healing because you have this thing called content aware. And just make sure you have sample all layers selected. If you don't have sample all layers selected, I can paint away on this and nothing's going to happen, because it's on a transparent layer and it can't see the other layers. So it's sampling from nothing, so it can't fix anything. So when you're using that tool, make sure sample all layers is selected. So then if I was to just draw over that little spot, it gets rid of it. It does a good, 90% of the time it does a good job. Like, I can just tap. I'm basically using a Wacom tablet. It's a pen, so I can draw. I'm lucky enough that I'm left-handed and I'm right-handed with the mouse, so I can use the mouse with the right hand and the pen with the left hand. You can do it with a mouse as well. It's just I find the Wacom tablets are way quicker. And if you're zoomed in like this with the brush tool selected doing an edit, if you just hold down the space key, you'll get a hand tool, and then you left click and drag it across, then let go of the space key again, and then you can paint out the blemish. So I can paint this out then by just painting over it, and it does an okay job. Sometimes it gets it completely wrong, but it's not bad. And I can see then on the right hand image what the overall image looks like, because sometimes you could, if you're doing a high-end edit, you could be in this far and tipping little dots like that out of it, because there's little bits of makeup and blemishes, not so much them, but you could get little black dots like that would have to be gotten rid of by left clicking and holding down. You see the way now it's getting, it's actually doing it wrong there now. The texture is wrong underneath it, okay? It does a good job on most things, but sometimes it gets it wrong. But I can see it on the original image here on the right hand side, because it's the original zoomed view that I wanted. So no matter how close I am here, I kind of, I don't get to be the case where I can't see the wood for the trees because I'm chopping something down and I basically made a mess of the original image because I'm so close to it, okay? So the other way to use that tool is, I'm just going to drag that down. I'm going to dump that layer. I'm going to make another new blank layer by clicking on the blank layer icon down here. The other tool that's in that tools palette, if we left click and hold, anywhere you see a little triangle in the bottom of the tools palette, each one of them triangles means when you left click there's another option. Okay, so the zoom tool doesn't have an option when you left click. You know, this tool here doesn't have an option when you left click. The move tool does. Okay, so where it has an option, left click and say healing brush tool. Okay, the healing brush tool requires a little bit more finesse, and Adobe made the healing brush tool to always be used with a hard edge brush. This is what people don't realize. The clone stamp needs to be used with a very, very soft edge brush, always a soft edge, but the healing brush has to be a hard edge brush. And you can check the brush by clicking on the brush size up here and just make sure that the hardness is on 100 instead of on 0. Okay, you don't want a soft edge brush when you're using this tool. Okay, so left bracket key to make it smaller. Now this tool works slightly differently. Okay, if I was to tap there now, it'll come up saying alt click to define a source point to be used to repair the image. Okay, and we also have to make sure sample all layers is on. So if I have current layer on and I alt clicked on that and then started painting, nothing would happen. You see the little crosshair? You can probably, yeah, you will see the crosshair. That crosshair follows my cursor movement there, my mouse movement with the paintbrush. Okay, but nothing happened. Okay, and the other option is aligned. I'll show you how to get the current layer there in a second, but the other option is aligned. At the minute it's not aligned. So if I was to draw, I'm going to start by sampling that little point right there, that black spot, right? And I'm going to draw here. And the point started from the black, and then I'm going to come up here, and you'll notice when I click down, the sample point went back to that black dot on our face. And when I clicked here, the sample point went back to that black dot. Clicked here, always back. That's not when you have the aligned option turned off. If you turn on the aligned option, and I alt clicked on that little black dot and I started painting and I let go here, if I was to move to say here, it follows me up here. It follows, so it keeps ahead of wherever I was. So wherever I sample, so if I sample directly underneath that black dot, so if I hold that down there and I start painting directly underneath, it will now sample, so it's always directly above. If I sample that black dot and I start painting directly to the right or the left of it, it will always be sampling from that point. So that's what the align does. Okay, so the current layer means it's sampling on a transparent layer, so it can't work. So you have to have it. If something happens and you're drawn away and it doesn't do anything, it's because you need to go from current to either current and below or all layers. 90% of the time I use all layers, because when I'm doing this particular part, it's always from the top down that I want to do it from. But sometimes you can use current and below. Say there's another layer on top and you don't want to clone stuff off it. So I use all layers. And now you'll see that if I alt click there and paint here, it's using the sample texture from the crosshair point, and it's using the sample colors from where I'm painting. It uses the texture from my sample. So that, see that little dimple there? I'm going to crosshair on that dimple. So I'm going to zoom it up just a little bit. I'm going to crosshair right on that dimple. That's a dark dimple, okay? And I'm going to start painting down here, and you see the way it's actually showing me the texture, right? So it put the texture in on the skin where it was smooth down there, okay? So you have to be very careful because it will clone the texture, okay? So in order to get rid of the dimple, what you would do is you'd alt click somewhere beside it that has something the same texture and just get rid of it that way. So you'd constantly alt and click, and for this here you'd probably start alt there, then bring it down, and you can see the crosshair coming back up, and alt click say there and just change that a little bit, and alt click and change, and alt click and change, okay? And then up here alt click and tap, alt tap, and you'll see as I'm tapping now the crosshair is just to about the 7 o'clock point because of where I alt clicked and tapped on it, okay? It's very, very when you have a pen it's not too bad, but to do this on a mouse it's very slow. So alt and tap, okay? So all we did there, if I turn off the background layer, was this. That's what we did, okay? But it's handy because I can zoom in and I have a look at the zoomed one, and I can see also the unzoomed one. So then you can turn off the top layer and you see before and after, okay? So if I'm looking on the right hand image, then I can see the overall look that I'm getting when I switch off the effect. But I can also see the zoomed in view, okay? So that's a really handy little tip to have. And to get it again, all you do is open up your image and go Window, Arrange, and across a new window for whatever the name of the image is, okay? It'll be sitting there, okay? And that's how you get a new window where you can have different zooms. All right, so any questions on that before we move on? Okay, I would assume there's no questions. Right. Okay. So I'm just going to close that down and close that down. So bear in mind, with those two windows open, you only ever had one image open. It wasn't a duplicate. It was exactly the same image open. One just had a zoomed in view or a zoomed out view, and the other one was wherever it was, okay? So doing that, you only still have one image open. It just gives you the option to actually zoom in and have a closer look at what you're doing. So we can pause cropping in camera. Just bear with me now. I'm just going back to my stuff to cover. Just get this out of the way, because I have a good bit of stuff that I've wrote down that I wanted to cover. I don't want to start doing something too head wrecking. So Justin, can you do shortcuts for that? Any questions on that? Yes, you can, Justin. Okay, so let's say we want shortcuts for the new window. Yeah, so we have our image open. So instead of going Window, Arrange, you can do shortcuts for absolutely anything that's in a menu item in Photoshop. Within reason, you can shortcut everything. It's just at some point you're going to run out of shortcuts. So if I want to do the shortcut for new window 4, I should be able to go down to keyboard shortcuts inside the edit menu, find the window menu, and go down and new window. So if I was to type in, I'm just trying to figure out something that might not. Right. So I tried Control Shift Alt I, and it said that it was part of file info, you know. So maybe I don't want to get rid of that. So you have to try and there. Control Shift Alt Y is not taken. So why not? So we're going to make that and accept that and click OK. So on a Mac then you'd be using Command Option Shift and Y. So if I hit Command Option Shift Y or Control Alt Shift Y, I have my new window. So I don't have to go to the menu. So it's just a question of trying to remember them little shortcuts. That's the thing, is actually remembering all the little shortcuts you might have. Now, the one for the vertical tiles was V, which was handy. M for match all. The Y is a bit kind of, because the W was taken for new window, so Y does it, and then you could do, probably you could do another one as well if you wanted to. If I go back here, sorry. Yeah, I could have 3 windows for the same image, you know, and you could have one if you really, you know, you could have one that was that zoomed in, and another one that was maybe that, and then the other one that was that, and then to tile them all, Control Alt V, and as you're working away on this one here, it still has the options. So if I click add new layer and get the brush tool, and I paint on this one like that, it's on all 3 of them. Okay, no butters. So close all. Nope. So it's basically a very handy tip. It's just, you have to just remember what the orcs are, because each item in Photoshop, when you click on any of the menus, like Control C is copy. It's the same in Microsoft Word, all the Microsoft Word Office stuff. It's all the same. It's Control C. Control V is paste. Control X is cut. You know, things like that. And then File New would be Control N for new. It always is Command N on a Mac. It's just a generic thing that's, ever since they started making the software, all software kind of uses them generic ones that will be the same, so they'll be the same across multiple platforms. Request, right. Flash it. Okay, I'm gonna do a little thing Eilish asked about it. I don't know if Eilish is there or not. If she is, she can pop in. She asked about the layers, the difference between layer masks and adjustment masks, okay, and how you know which one to use. So I'm just going to show you. Say we take that image, and we just open it up. So, in the layers palette, okay, masks, I covered them. I think it was what it was episode 3. I covered layers. Okay, it's probably, it still is on the if you subscribe to the channel and go back, you'll be able to see it. But if I was to say add a new, these are the adjustment layers here that we can add. Okay, and that's the reason why I had that switched the other way around. Actually, is because when I click on that, I can't see the bottom. Well, yous can't. Okay, so they're the options you can add an adjustment layer in. I'd always add the adjustment layer from this menu. I'd never go and add an adjustment layer from image adjustment, because it's a destructive change unless there's a specific reason why I want it to be destructive. I'd never go in there and add them. I'd always add them from that menu there inside the layers palette. So if I was to say do a black and white, okay, it puts in this white mask by default. Okay, that white mask inside of Photoshop is, it represents a way that you can kind of hide the effect on that adjustment layer. Now you can also have an adjustment, you can also, if I was to copy that layer now, just reset that back down. If I copy that layer and I can put a mask on it by clicking on that button there, I'll just widen this out a little bit to show you. That's a mask on the layer as well. So the layer can have a mask, and also an adjustment layer can have a mask. So there's more, they're the same thing, it's just you can have a mask on an adjustment layer and you can have a mask on a layer. Okay, an adjustment layer is a non-destructive adjustment that happens to the image. A layer like that background layer, that second one there, that's actually pixels. It's not an adjustment layer. So if I was to turn off the background, if I turn that off, it's turning off all the pixels. Okay, if I just turn the top one off, which is an adjustment layer, it's only turning off the effect. Okay, that's all it's turning off, is the effect. Okay, so say, argument's sake, I wanted to mix the black and white. It's so cheesy, but say I wanted to mix the black and white with the color. Okay, So I like the color in the background, but I want to make her black and white or something. You know what I mean? It can be done, okay? In this case, it's probably, if I just wrap my head around it for a couple of minutes, probably quite easy to get it to because it's just there's something that came up a second ago that someone had asked about. But before I do that, this is just how you would use a mask on an adjustment layer. So click on the adjustment layer itself, and then select the mask. You'll see that the mask is selected because it has like 4 kind of little corner bars on it, and that means then that that's selected, okay? And when that's selected there, if I get the brush tool and I change the default colors here, click on them and switch them around to black, so black's on top, and use the right bracket key to make my mouse bigger, and if I paint it 100%, what's happened is I've painted black on the mask, and when you put black on a mask, it hides whatever the effect is that the mask is actually affecting. So that mask is on the adjustment layer that turns things black and white. So by putting in this black mark on the mask, you can see it by holding Alt or Option and clicking on the mask. I drew that on the mask. So all around here is transparent because it's white around the outside, but where that's black, the mask is now hiding the effect on that layer, and that adjustment layer effect is the black and white. Okay, now if I just think for a second, there should be an easy way. Yeah, I think there is. So say we wanted to do it the other way, so I'm just going to select all, click the mask, select all, and hit delete. Oh no, it won't do it that way. Sorry, select all, and if we fill, so edit, it's not going to do it that way either. Oh sorry, you have to have the adjustment layer on. That was my fault, sorry about that. With the whole mask selected, I could just hit the delete key and it just deletes all the pixels off the mask, and it brings it back to the way it was. So say I only wanted to paint in a certain part of that image as black and white. You, with the white mask, you'd have to paint in every single thing with black and leave the white bit out. But there's another way you can have a white mask turn to a black mask. You have two different ways of doing it. The first way is edit, fill, with the mask selected, and you can just choose black, and now it hides the effect. That's the first way. That works on every version of Photoshop. Now if you have the newer versions of Photoshop, if you click the mask, double click on it, you can view properties, and there's an option in the properties. Oh, where is it? Oh, there should be an option and it's not there anymore. The option to invert it is not selected. Okay, so Photoshop again have changed things. Yeah, right, there it is there. Click on the mask, click on the properties option, and then you have an option to invert. It's the same thing. So now with that inverted, I can get a brush, change it to white by hitting X on the keyboard or switching the two around, and now I can paint in black and white on it. So if I only wanted certain parts of it to be black and white, I could painstakingly paint around that, and you know, I'm only black and white the part that's white on that mask. So the white mask means the black and white effect shows through. Yeah, Control I will invert the mask. Yeah, that's the third way to do it. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, you can do that as well. Yeah. I'll explain what David said there. I was just getting to that now. So we select all again, and we actually just dump the mask. Okay, and delete. Okay, so that is now back to the way we had it. So what Dave was pointing out there was, if you had made a selection first, so very, very basic, right? If I go normal there and the selection on the marquee and just draw a square or something like that, that selection, that's a selection, okay? And this is super basic. And if I click now the add new layer mask there, it turned that selection and created a mask out of it. So whatever was selected was white and the outside was black, okay? And what David was saying there was if I press Command or Control I with the mask selected, it will invert it, okay? It just inverts the mask. So that switches them around, okay? So here's the other way of doing it, okay? Delete. Now, just bear with me 1 second because I just want to try something here, because the theory behind it is perfectly sound, okay? It's just I need to try something off screen here just to see if I can show you, because I'm not going to show you if it's not going to work 100%. And if it doesn't work, I will find out a way of making it work. Okay. Right, it's not exactly 100%. Okay. So that particular way that I was going to try and do it doesn't work, right? So what we're going to do is this. There should be another way we can do it. Because we've got a certain color there that's blue, and the rest of her skin, apart from her eyes obviously, is skin toned or brown, made of red and yellow and stuff like that. You can go into select color range, and if you choose sample colors at the top, now this is just eyeballing it here. Now I'll probably there's a million different ways of doing this, and I would have other ways of doing it, but the ways to do it, if I showed you now, you'd be lost within 3 seconds, because I haven't showed you the basics of what we'll be going through over the next couple of weeks. So if I clicked on the blue there, and if I just select the add eyedropper, and I just keep clicking on the blue, and I move that over to that side. Okay, so basically what that has done now is it's more or less selected all the blue, which is white here. So if I click OK and turn on the selection, the adjustment mask, right, and click add new layer mask, it's got it pretty much there, apart from hairy bits up here, okay? But what it has done, it's actually really bad, and I wouldn't even show you. It's really bad, yeah. Things like that are an absolute pain. But basically, what it's done is the white part in the mask has hidden the effect here, and the black part has allowed it to happen here, okay? So it's not the way I would do it, because it's not very good. I'll research a better way of doing it, and probably in the next couple of episodes I'll do it, because when you're making this kind of thing with selections on hair and stuff like that, it's absolutely insane. There's a million, and I never usually do this because I just don't have a reason to do it. There is selection tools and there's plugins and all that kind of stuff, but say you just wanted the lips to be black and white, or sorry, the lips to be color, okay? What you could do is this: zoom right in, add a new layer mask, which is white, get the brush tool, B on the keyboard, hit X on the keyboard to switch the colors around, and you'll see it's black there. And then use the left bracket key to move down on the size of the brush, and it's a painstaking thing, but basically you have to paint around the outside of it. And in all fairness, if I was doing something with like a car or something like that, and I was doing a knockout, there's the pen tool is what I would use for it. It takes a couple of minutes to do it, but the amount of times that you're trying to use the smart mask and all of this kind of malarkey that Photoshop have, and it's kind of more or less, it's finished there now, and all I have to do is fill in the inside of it. So it looks like I'm painting with red, but I'm actually not painting with red. I'm painting on the mask with black, and because I'm painting on the mask with black, it's hiding the effect, and the effect on the layer that I'm hiding is a black and white filter. Okay, it's not a very good way of making a black and white filter, but it shows the what you can do with a mask. Okay, so right, I'm going right up into here and hit 5 on the keyboard, and you get about 50% strength. You'll see it up there, it's turned to 50. It's just to get a little bit of a fade on it. Move it across. This is, you know, it's time consuming, but the problem is Photoshop has came out with so many little plugins that are supposedly making jobs easier and all the rest of it, and the problem is you have to keep going backwards and forwards over everything because it didn't do a good job in the first place. Now, so to see the mask, if we alt click the mask itself, we can see it, and now we can see that there's little bits that have to be filled in. So we basically paint around the little bits that have to be filled in. Okay, and click back on the adjustment layer. So now you have that classic thing where you can have a black and white image with a red rose. Okay, you just paint it in by hand. Now, there's nothing saying that we have to keep that black mask completely black. We can also change the opacity of the mask, the density of it, okay, by clicking on the properties. There's a bunch of different ways of doing it. The cheat kind of way is just to go into the density and just bring it down. And what you're doing is you're making the mask gray. Okay, so if I was to bring that to 50%, and look at the mask, it's now gray. Okay, so by going from 100%, which was black, to 50, it's now 50% gray. So that 50% gray is allowing 50% of the color to come back through the black and white. Sorry, not the color, the black and white effect, because I have a black and white effect on this layer, the adjustment layer. So it's allowing 50% of that to come back through. So it depends on exactly what you want to do. You can have 100% of the color there. Sorry, 100% of the color on the lips by having completely black on the mask. Or if you reduce the density, you're allowing more of the actual black and white adjustment layer to come through. Okay? Control blend mode on top of that works well. Yeah, you can use the blend modes as well. The way I would normally do a black and white is this. Okay, I'm just going to turn that off for a second. I wanted to show this because this particular way allows you to put a mask on it, and it gives you a very visual representation of, oh, if I have a mask and it's paint black on it, it hides the effect, and if it's white, it shows the effect. Okay, so if I was to make that image black and white, I would never use the black and white filter because it makes a different image for every single image. It just makes it different. So as David was saying there, right, there's a bunch of different ways of doing it, but I would normally do this. Now I don't know whether David was talking about this, but this is the way I would do it. New adjustment layer and choose solid color. Okay, and in the solid color just choose white or gray. Just make sure there's no color component. So I'd normally just choose black and click OK. And if you change the blend mode of that solid color fill to color, what it has in effect done is completely stripped all the color information out of the image without adding its own version of black and white. So if I was to, like, that's the black and white filter, right? And by default it does something to it. Okay, it's changed the tones. That's a complete 100% strip of all the colors. When I go down to that color fill there and I just switch it on, that just strips the color out of the image. It doesn't change the density, it doesn't change any of the colors. That puts in a different tone. Look, see the difference? That's with the black and white effect, and that's just a pure strip. And then the black and white effect, then you see you've got all these slide bars that you can wang around, and you can, like, anything at 200% that does that to an image means it's a bad thing. Um, Obviously, you wouldn't be doing it to 200%, but it's just I have my way of doing things. Um, and obviously, then with that black and white, you can click on that little hand tool there, which means that as you click and drag, it selects the tones you want to work on. So if you want to brighten the skin, you can see it's brightening the red channel. And then say you wanted to darken the blue in the background, you click on it and you'll see it's actually going to the cyans now and it's darkening the blue. That's very handy, right? But what you're actually doing there is you're color correcting a black and white image, right? That's one of the ways you can do it, is to use that. I wouldn't use that either. I'd use a different tool, but I would still be color correcting it in the same kind of fashion. Okay, so that's a kind of a handy way of doing it there. You can just drag it back and make the background darker or make the background lighter, you know what I mean? Depending on what effect you want. And you can see that there's nothing but cyan in there. If I turn it off, that's cyan in the background. And so basically, dragging that slide bar, I can have completely black or oversaturated whites, you know what I mean? I can change what, like, it's obviously ridiculous looking there on the screen, but I can change it by just dragging the slide bar. So always remember though, if you're doing that hand pull thing, make sure and click it off before you go out of the dialog box, because what can happen is you can actually end up being in a load of trouble where it's still selected and switched on and you're doing something else and all hell will break loose. So just make sure before you get out of that dialog box with the hand, it's in other tools as well, that you switch it off, okay? Because if it's not switched off, you're in trouble. So you could do that, and what I do there is get rid of the black and white conversion. So I'd normally just call that black and white. I'd take the mask off it, I don't want it. Delete the mask, okay? So if I was to color correct that now as a black and white image, if you choose the adjustments and if you go down, you can't see it here, so I'm going to just drag it up again. No, that's not it. Sorry. If you go, delete that, adjustments, selective color. Okay. Actually, no. Yeah, selective color. Okay. This brings up a whole lot of options. Okay. But basically, what it is if I turn the black and white on top of that, and I bring me properties, say, over here. Actually, I'll leave them where they are. I know the background was cyan. So if I go into the cyans, and if I add black to them, I can darken the cyan. But you see the way it doesn't turn the whole image to pants when I go to 100%? The other way, it was gone absolutely bananas. And I can go and take out the black in the cyan. It's basically black color replacement in printing from years ago. So the cyan, I can go in there and change the black amount in the cyan to darken it down. And if you look, take the black and white conversion off, you can see that by adding black to the cyans, you're darkening and lightening the cyans. Okay? And if you go into the reds and you add black to it, you're darkening and lightening the reds. Okay? Now I would use that for this and for other stuff. I'd be for color correcting images and for cleaning and boosting colors and stuff, but I'll do that another day, because that's way down the line. So if I turn the black and white back on and go into the reds now, and I take the blacks out, you can see the skin tone getting softer. And if I add blacks in, the skin tone gets darker. Okay. So that's only one of the ways I would use I'd use reds in different ways, but I'm not going to go into it here and now because it's an hour and 40 minutes in on it. The actual proper way to use the selective color would take about an hour to explain. So I will do it eventually if someone wants to know. What I mean was on the lip selection, if you can blend mode in the actual mask to let it bring the highlights back through the mask. Yes, sorry Dave, yeah, you could. Yeah, you could just put a blend and just drag it and it mixes the two together. Yeah, you can do it that way, yeah. As I said, it's kind of like Photoshop gives you a million different ways of doing things. But the the trick is to do it without detrimentally messing up the image, you know, and know that you can do it in such a way that it's not going to detract from the image or go and get overbaked, you know. So yes, you can do it that way as well, the blend modes, yeah. Um, so at least that way, going from a color to a black and white image, it's a complete strip of the color, and it's not adding any extra black and white to it, if you understand me. Whereas the other way with the black and white option in the adjustments palette, the black and white here, that adds, you know, if I hit auto on that image and auto on another image, they're all different. Every single one of them is a different conversion. So you don't have the ability to get the same look across multiple images. So say, David, you're doing a wedding or something like that, or someone's party or something, you have to take, and you want to put a certain effect on all the images. The problem with that is it'll auto every single one of them, and all the black and whites will look different. So it's all about down to basically getting a saleable entity in an image that's repeatable, that can be done when you're not there, when you're out making more money, you know. So 20 to, it's not too bad. So any questions on that before we go on? I said that's only a very, very small foray into selective color and how you'd actually correct the correct colors and stuff like that. So, don't think there's any questions. Right. So what I'll do now with the last is right, selection, highlights, cropping camera, remove skies. Right, depth of field, crop, the DPI, cropping an image, custom keyboards. Actually, we've done fairly much everything I wanted to cover tonight. So we're not too bad as regards, you know, the time we have. We've about 15 minutes left if anyone wants to do anything else, or we can just log off and call it quits. Because anything else I want to cover would be very, very color theory intensive, you know. Well, if we were doing the color stuff, say we did the just let you rack your head around this for a couple of minutes. Okay. Right. It's a graphic, right? The bit on the left hand side, the light part of it, ignore it for the minute, because light is basically additive. The what you call it, the ink is subtractive. Okay, so when you add more ink to a page, it gets darker. When you add light to it, it adds and gets brighter. Okay, so if we were to basically just get a tool here and just so we're basically only worried about this end. Okay. Yeah. So we're only going to be worried about that, right? So this is going to be really, really quick. And it's only just a prep kind of thing that's going to lead on to something that's going to happen probably next week. I'm back in work on Tuesday, so there mightn't be as many regular ones as there was for the last couple of weeks. It depends on how it goes. But our cameras are red, green, and blue. okay, they see images in red, green, and blue. Okay, so if I was to take the red channel there, then see the green channel and the blue channel. Okay, it's red, green, and blue on your cameras, right? But our printers print in cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, as well as light cyan, light magenta, light yellow, and then they have oranges and greens and stuff like that. But 90% of your printers are CMYK. Okay, so in an ink-based system, your cyan is a pure color, your magenta is a pure color, and your yellow is also a pure color. And if we mix yellow and cyan together, we get green. Conversely, if we mix yellow and magenta, we get red. And if we mix cyan and magenta, we get blue. All right. So if I was to wanted to boost the color, instead of getting the saturation, if I got an image, right, I laugh when I see it being done, because it's so bad. Yeah. Actually, we get this one. Crop and transform, blend it. Yeah, we'll just get that. Okay. So that's the image that we had earlier. Now, this add hue saturation. I'm just going to ram that up to 100%, right? And obviously that's pretty pants, okay? I can't say what I want to say about it, but it's pants, okay? So if it's pants at 100%, then it stands to reason it's still pants at 10%. It's just 10% pants, okay? So in my head, you just can't use a slider that does that at 100% and expect it to be any better at 50. It's not going to be, like, you know what I mean? It's not how I would add saturation to a color, or boost a color, or clean a color. You know, I just don't do it that way. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at this, in the sense that I'm going to just show you this, and if there's any interest from anybody, I can go through it again next week. That's the next option, right? But if you were to take green and wanted to boost green, okay, you would boost the colors that it's made of, which is cyan and yellow, because it's made of green. If you wanted to boost yellow, you just boost yellow because it's only yellow on its own. If you wanted to boost red, you boost magenta and yellow. If you wanted to boost blue, you'd boost magenta and cyan. And obviously magenta is its own color and cyan is its own color, so you just boost them normally, okay? And it's a much cleaner way of doing it. And then if you wanted to clean the colors, which brightens the colors, because when you have cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and all these colors going down, it gets muddy very quickly. But when you clean a color by taking out its impure part of the color that makes it impure, it gets brighter and it gets more vibrant. Okay, so in cyan, it's its own color, so you take out magenta and yellow. The same with yellow, you take out cyan and magenta, and in magenta you take out cyan and yellow. Okay, now red is made of magenta and yellow. Okay, so I'm just going to do this, right? Brush. If I have to try and choose a color that's actually not in it, fucking heck. Right, so there. So if red is made of these two colors, when we add it together we get this one. If you add cyan into the mix, you get this dirty mix in the middle. Alright, so by taking cyan out of red, so you leave the magenta and yellow alone and you take cyan out of it, okay? And if there's interest in this, I'll show you next week how this is done. And then obviously then exactly the same with green. What makes green dirty is magenta, because when you add cyan and yellow together you get a nice color green. But when you bring magenta into the mix, you get this center portion here, and that's dirty. Okay? And the same with blue. Cyan and magenta make blue, but what makes blue dirty is when you add yellow to it. It's the opposite. So blue and yellow are opposite each other on a color wheel. Cyan and red are opposite each other, and green and magenta are opposite each other on a color wheel. Okay, so that's just a kind of a very quick thing on color where I'd be using that theory behind it instead of just ramming the saturation slide bar up. Now 5-10%, if that's your thing, go ahead and do it, but that's not what I do. So any quick questions before I log off, because I'm going to log off now and go in and enjoy the rest of my bank holiday weekend before I have to go back to work on Tuesday. So hopefully you all had a bit of fun. The people that started at the start seem to be still here, which is a good thing. So and hopefully anyone else can catch up on it when it gets uploaded later on. So I'm going to say I'm going to switch over now and just say night, and hopefully no bothers at all, John. And hopefully, Michael, if there's any questions, give me a shout, okay? And thanks, Justin. Enjoy work on Tuesday. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Michael, no problem. Yeah, so, as I say, a lot of this is it's what I teach one-to-one, but I would teach, obviously, more stuff that I can't show here as such, because, I just can't show it. And, Robert... Yeah, no brothers. And thanks, John. And thanks, Michael. Thanks, Dave. And yeah, I will definitely see you next time. So, just give me 1 second here. Yeah, I'm going to just switch over, and I'll be available on the chat for a couple of minutes if anyone wants to talk. I'm just going to change over to the intro slide, so the audio is going to go, but I'll still be there for a couple of minutes. All right, if you need to say anything to me, like.